All right, so today is going to be an interesting episode, and I want to tell everybody right up front, we really try to be family friendly. Every once in a while, things get a little bit passionate. Sometimes things are said. Sometimes we review articles and whatnot with, let's just call it mature content. This is one of those episodes. So we're going to be. So today is going to be. An interesting
wait one second. Got a little bit of a technical difficulty there.
So here's what I want everyone to kind of understand. As we go through the various reels that we're going to show you, some of the topics that we're going to have, if you've got young ears, in the car, in the house, or whatnot, you're probably going to want to put in headphones. There's going to be some stuff if you're actually viewing it, like you are on YouTube. I know we have an audio audience as well. There's going to be some stuff on here as well that, again, you might not want kids to see. The reason why we're going through this process, though, is that because every time, and I've seen this as a legislator, every time I go through the process of saying, hey, this is actually going on, I either get told that that's not happening, or that would never happen, in my school district, or that would never happen with my kids. And I think it's time that as parents, as people that are maybe prospective parents, maybe your grandparent, I think it's time that regardless of where you stand on some of this stuff, it's time to take the blinders off. Because I realize, as Tina kind of pointed out in the comments, a lot of this has a certain ick factor that we are all very uncomfortable with and nobody wants to really review or be aware of. But here's the deal. I'm going to share a quick story. In the Virginia General Assembly, we had a bill not long ago that said we're not going to ban any books from school libraries. Right? So probably didn't go as far as maybe it should have, but it said, look, we're not going to ban any books. We're not going to tell the public school libraries what to do. The local jurisdictions have complete authority with respect to that decision-making process. However, we are going to require that any books that have the kind of explicit content be listed on the website and give parents an opportunity to be able to say, I don't want my child to check out those books. And to hammer this point home, the patron of the bill, Delegate Anderson at the time, read off excerpts and showed pictures of books that had actively been in the Virginia public school library system. So this wasn't theoretical. This was going on. And our Democrat colleagues got very upset. In fact, I had one colleague of mine tell me, Nick, it was totally inappropriate for Tim to read off stuff like that on the floor of the House of Delegates. And I said, well, Delegate, if it was inappropriate to read it off on the House floor, how much more inappropriate is it to be in a public school library? And he goes, Nick, nobody wants those books in a public school library. I'm like, well, I guess we'll see when the vote comes up. Not only did he vote against the bill, every single Democrat voted against the bill. There wasn't one that said, you know what, I don't agree with the Republicans on a lot of things, but I think it's perfectly appropriate for parents to at least know that this content is there so that they can make an informed decision about what their 13-year-old sees. Or in some cases, their middle schooler. Or maybe in some cases, their elementary schooler. Nope, couldn't get one. Couldn't get one. So I'm tired of people saying it's not happening and nobody wants this to happen. Clearly, people do. And so we're going to go through the receipts on this. But more importantly, we're going to talk about very, very practical things that you can do to combat this, because it's not just the gratuitous things. It's not just the ideologies surrounding gender or sex or whatever else. It's not just that. It is an entire worldview that's being perpetrated, whether it be things like critical theory, whether it be a general animosity toward American history and its founding. Because a lot of things that get dressed up as just teaching hard history end up only teaching it in one perspective and from one context. Because there's plenty of things that we can all look at from American history and say, yeah, that was wrong. That needed to be corrected. In fact, in some cases, we can even say there's still amends that need to be made. But to take the worst parts of American history and then to use that to define all of American history is inappropriate. And it makes no sense. It makes no sense for a government-run school system to teach children to have an animosity toward their history, toward their country, unless, of course, there's something deeper going on. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Now, Unfortunately, with me in the audience is not Christian, because Christian and Hamilton are actually overseas right now in the UK. They're actually attending a wedding for two members of our community who met on our community and who are tying the knot today. So to Jonam and Rosanna, God bless. We congratulate you on a very, very happy day. We hope the weather and everything is beautiful, and we're thrilled that Christian and Hamilton could both be there for that. But thankfully, to make sure that I just don't go totally rogue today, we have someone that will almost definitely go rogue today, and that is my beautiful bride, Tina, Queen of the Bees.
I will go rogue so that you don't have to, honey. You can continue being the level head while I just go full Tina on this.
Burn it down, baby. Burn it down. It's so hot when you do that. All right. So let's kind of jump in right in there. Let's kind of define our terms here on what we're going to talk about. So I kind of said this in the beginning, right? Like it or not, this is happening. And the thing that you have to understand is that even if it maybe is not happening in your individual school district, the thing that I would ask you to consider is, do you know it's not happening, or do you think that there's a very low probability that it's happening? Right? Do you know that some of this content is not in the public school library, or do you think it couldn't possibly be? Do you know the members of your school board would not let something like this take place, or do you just think that because you've known some of them for a long time? That's one of the things that we're going to get into. But it's also like the deeper ideology, because a lot of parents right now feel completely overwhelmed. You feel outgunned because it feels like you're competing not just against sometimes the school system, even if you have teachers that you love and respect, right? You feel like you're fighting the school system. You feel like you're fighting Hollywood. You feel like you're fighting the music industry. You feel like you're fighting most of social media. And you feel like you're fighting a friend group that you can't constantly monitor. None of us as parents can constantly monitor everything our kids are doing, especially as they get older. And now through the power of a smartphone, they have the entire world in their hands. And so we do feel outgunned. And I say this to you as a father of three children, a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old, a 16-year-old. I am sure that there have been things that have happened or that they've seen or whatnot that I'm not aware of, that maybe I didn't properly monitor, or that I couldn't control, whatever it was. Like, I'm not naive. But by the same token, as I think about the relationship that I have with each of my children, one of them who's married, one of them who's about to go off to the military, and one of them who's, on the second half of her high school experience, we have a great relationship with our kids. They think about things in a very level-headed manner. They seem to be very, very strong in their faith. And again, there's a million things that Tina and I could write an entire book on things that we wish we would have done differently with respect to raising our kids, that we think we could have done better. But the thing that I want people to understand is there is hope, right? In this time of social media influence and everything else. You don't have to be the perfect parent to help your kids navigate this, but there are certain things that you can do that can help a lot in order to make sure that you are properly imparting your views onto your children, and perhaps most importantly, equipping them with the critical thought process that allows them to actually take in information from a variety of resources, from a variety of perspectives, and come out the other side stronger from the experience, to where it's no longer mom and dad's faith. It's no longer mom and dad's worldview or perspective. It's theirs. And it's theirs because they've been able to test it and found it worthy. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about how to do this. And before I get too far, that's probably a great transition into the Tuttle Twins. So one of the tools that we used with our kids was the Tuttle Twins. And when we used it, it was just, they had a book series, and that was really great. But now, like through Angel Studios, you have the entire cartoon series, which is actually pretty funny. I remember watching cartoons with my kids growing up. In fact, sometimes Tina would tease me that I would be watching a cartoon with my kids. She'd come in like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm watching. The kids aren't here, honey." Like, these are the sort of cartoons where actually adults enjoy watching them too, because there is humor, which is both child friendly, but also appropriate for adults without being like weird or having strange innuendo. It's just funny. And the messages are very, very good. It actually breaks down fairly complex political, philosophical principles about responsibility, and makes it easy and fun for your kids to learn about. Plus, there's now the entire box set. So they not only have the cartoons that you can watch, they also have the books that go along with it, which again, these are really entertaining. A lot of them almost look kind of like comic books. And so it's fun for kids to read. And again, I'm not just saying like isn't this a neat concept? We used books from the Tuttle Twins in order to help illustrate various ideas to our children and help them think about these things in ways that were accessible for kids, right? When you're trying to explain the Federal Reserve to your child, it's probably difficult to get into a long conversation about, the creature at Jekyll Island or whatnot. You want to have something that they can understand and relate to, and Tuttle Twins does a brilliant job of this. And if you go in the link in the description now, you're going to get 66% off the box set, right? So really significant savings. Plus, you're going to be equipping yourself with something to teach your kids, your future kids, your grandkids, and you're also going to be helping the show, right? You use that link in the description. It helps the show a great deal. It tells our advertisers that advertising with us puts them in front of the audience that's going to appreciate what they do. So go, please check that out. Link in the description. Like I said, you're not going to be. Plus,
it's so cute and it's so funny. And what cartoon is complete without a mischievous little animal sidekick friend?
Derek.
This is Derek. He's a trash panda, if you couldn't tell. See? And he's super duper cute. And this little series is very funny. And Nick was the voice of George Washington.
I may have been the voice of George Washington.
It was great. Right. It was actually really fun watching Nick do this. It was cute.
So if you want your kids to believe that George Washington sounded exactly like me, then go ahead and watch those cartoons. All right, let's go ahead and jump into this. So first things first, no, you're not crazy, and no, conservatives are not crazy. This stuff is actually happening. Let's go to some of the proof. Again, if I wanted to put every single possible clip I could find on this, we would be here for days going through it. So I tried to select some that I thought properly illustrated this point. So let's look at this first clip right here. And this is Jeffrey Marsh. And Jeffrey Marsh is a very popular trans activist on TikTok as well as other social media platforms. And he is all about convincing kids that, if their family doesn't accept the decisions that they're making, well, you got a new family with Jeffrey Marsh. And so we're going to watch a compilation of some of his clips right here. Let's get to it.
Talk to the kids. Parents watch the video and then hand the phone over to the young kids. Hi there. I dress only for myself. Going no contact will feel worse. Can't lie to you. You are saving the relationship by destroying it. Thank you. If you have no family, you can be in my family. Hi, love. Here are 3 ways to disrespect your elders. Sometimes we're a boy, sometimes we're a girl. Because human beings are creatures, and we're wild and exciting. I'm at the shopping mall, LOL. If you need a new family, you're welcome here, in this family, on this page. Hi, you're safe. You're not in trouble. There are no girls' movies. There are no boys' sports. Happy Pride.
I'm going to stop it right there because I quite frankly don't want to watch anymore. But again, this guy is highly influential on TikTok. And unlike those of us that will call out some of the things this guy does, he doesn't get banned, right? I've had stuff get banned before. I've had accounts get banned before when we're just pointing things out and asking very honest questions about things. But no. Jeffrey Marsh is perfectly allowed to speak to your kids. And I love it how he sets this off with saying, all right, parents, watch this video first and then hand it to the young kids, as if that's how this works. Right? As if a kid that has a smartphone is saying, oh, well, Jeff has said I should show this to my parents first, so I'll go do that. No, that's not what's doing. That's a very clever way to make it look like he's not trying to do something strange or nefarious. But in the end, there's 2 ways to look at this. Either it's predatory, or he absolutely honestly believes that this is the right thing to do. And I love to quote C.S. Lewis on this, where he talks about sometimes the more dangerous people in our society are not the evil robber barons. Sometimes it's the moral busybodies who have convinced themselves that whatever they're doing or whatever they're doing for your children or to your children is actually morally justifiable. It's important. They're saving them. And C.S. Lewis says that they will torment you without end because they do so with the approval of their own conscience. And so I think it's important to understand that this is not just a question of, trying to monitor your kids' social media activity and seeing what they're actually watching and what they're actually doing, but understanding that this is out there and it is prevalent. It's all over the place. This is not, I did not just cherry park Jeffrey Marsh as if this is a one-off, right? And to hammer this point home even more, I'm going to go ahead to this next one, and this was this is on social media, but this actually came from a let me get my mouse working up here. Okay. And this was a parent just saying, did parents even realize that this was going on, right? So let's go ahead and watch this.
Check this out. We just sent our kids to bed. This Jurassic World was still playing, and we came across this.
You were trying to tell me something before. What? Earlier, in the lift, before the Noctosaurus went all crazy. It seems super important. It was. The truth is, Sammy, I've fallen for you.
Lord have mercy.
Like, hard. Real hard.
Jurassic World, Jurassic World.
So the thing is that a lot of people will look at that, well, what's the big deal, right? This is all just perfectly acceptable. And the issue is that obviously there are some people that think that there is absolutely nothing wrong with homosexual relationships, right? If you're a traditional Christian, we actually have some pretty strict rules on what constitutes appropriate sexual relationships. And spoiler alert, it's between a married man and woman, married man and woman. That's the only appropriate relationship that is supposed to feature like actual, sexual relationships. But obviously there can be romantic relationships. But this is something where it's somewhat of a battle between the culture and people of various religious faiths and whatnot. And a lot of people look at this and be like, what's the problem? Well, I think the problem on some level is that once upon a time, these weren't the sort of themes that we put into children's entertainment. And the answer that you're getting from a lot back, well, that's because you're a bigot. That's because children's entertainment used to be bigoted and exclusionary, and now we're just being more inclusive. Okay, well, again, regardless of how you feel about that, you should know that it is happening. You should know that it's become a regular thing now for these themes, these questions, to be infused into children's entertainment. So a lot of times, if you're just putting something on, don't be surprised when all of a sudden your kids are asking you questions about things. And again, if you let them watch it, your kids are likely to assume it's perfectly okay.
And it just becomes a popular thing. I remember Allie was about 12 years old and went for a sleepover at a fellow conservative's house. And that person's daughter was leading other girls in the group because it was like a slumber party. And they were all talking about how now they're bisexual. And Allie called and said, I really want to go home. I want to come home. And so we went and got her. But the girls were fighting over each other and deciding that they were now either lesbian or bisexual at like these girls ranged from like 11, 12 age range. And it was absolutely mortifying that I could send my kid over to somebody's birthday party that's a slumber party type of thing, who I knew was a Christian, and they have the same values, and they are homeschool parents too. Like this is right within our sphere.
Yeah.
And to find out that they were all the girls were on this bisexual bandwagon because it's become popular. It's become a fad, like a trend now. It's not even like it used to be that people are going, oh, I was born gay. I'm just different, da 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 da, and I just can't help who I am. And now you're more popular if you have this extra thing about yourself. And now it's a complete fad, a trend, and it's really mortifying. I mean, I'm now looking back, I'm like, I should have just been against sleepovers completely with kids. But just the fact that this stuff is it's playing and you don't maybe even see that it's on, it is normalizing all of this behavior. And in fact, making it seem like popular and mysterious, like back in the day when I was a kid, we all dreamed about like, oh, the boy who was so, you get all the little girls that are boy crazy, right? And that is the thing that it sort of spreads among young teen girls back when I was a kid. And you were either a boy crazy girl or you were a more serious girl. Well, now we have this other thing that is now infiltrating in. And I feel like it's nothing but a fad, just like the boy crazy phase was a fad.
Well, keep in mind too, there's something else going on here at the same time which needs to be understood, right? It would be one thing if you look at like woke and progressive ideology, and we're going to get into this a little bit more later in the show, but it would be one thing if this were singular in nature, which is to say that, hey, we think that all relationships need to be treated equally within the public sphere or within the social sphere. Okay, now again, that's an argument. Go ahead and make that argument. The question is do we make it to kids? The other thing is this. At the same time that kids are also being exposed to concepts of critical theory, and again, I've got the receipts on that as well. I was in a debate on this, and I got told that I was just sowing discontent and racism, and then I actually pulled out all of the documentation from the Virginia Department of Education and showed, but beyond a shadow of a doubt, that they were actually pushing critical theory. What is critical theory rooted in? A lot of people think of critical race theory, but it's bigger than that. There's critical gender theory, there's queer theory, there's critical race theory, there's critical theory. Critical theory is rooted in this kind of Marxist interpretation of reality that says that there's oppressors and there's oppressed. Now, if the oppressors all happen to be one type of sexual orientation and predominantly one type of skin color, and you find yourself as that particular sexual orientation and that particular, so you're a white heterosexual, right? You're the bad guy. You're the villain in the story of critical theory. How do you become not the villain? Well, you've got to adopt. You can't change your skin color, right? You've got to adopt some sort of trait, some sort of attribute, which now puts you into the oppressed column, which means you're safe and you're a good person and you're to be celebrated and defended. You're not to be questioned, and you're not like those other people. Well, again, if you adopt something like this, you automatically fall into that category. And you can take issue with that, but I'm not wrong. That's actually taking place. That's where the social contagion part of this. Now let's go into, kind of, again, when we talk about like the entertainment industry, young children perform certain theme dances with drag queens at RuPaul's Drag Con as adults clap along and hand them cash tips. So we're going to show you the video right now. I'm going to mute this because it's not relevant, but basically what you're seeing is this little boy in red shirt and shorts is just dancing up on the stage with all the drag queens, and adults are handing him cash, and apparently this is totally appropriate. And again, this is not some one-off somewhere. This is RuPaul's Drag Con. So this is considered, again, nobody wants this. There's another kid dancing on stage. Nobody wants it. Yes, they do. They actively want it. They're actively promoting it. And they're essentially saying there's something wrong with you if you don't think that this is perfectly okay and acceptable.
This is what grooming looks like, you guys. When people talk about grooming, everybody has this image in their head of the full-fledged, we're in total pedophilia mode now, and this child's being fully violated. Well, there was a long process through grooming that gets someone all the way to that phase, and it starts off with befriending, normalizing, introducing new things that you kind of don't want the parents to know about. Unfortunately, we've got a new generation of parents grooming their own kids for this stuff as well. And so it's crazy because it's really sad to me that so many of these kids are so confused now and they have no idea they have been groomed to think the way they are thinking. You are a victim of grooming, and you're a victim of, this is abuse. Now, it may not have led all the way to the conclusion that all of our brains go to when we think of a groomer, but there is a lot of different ways to groom. People have groomed people to become shooters. People have groomed children to become child armies in some countries, and don't even have necessarily a sexual nature. And so grooming can be about just about anything that you're trying to introduce to a child that is outside of the norm or outside of what would be considered ethical. And so make no mistake, these shows, this is grooming. This is them preparing this child for a life that looks like their life, or that looks like what they think it should be. And they're trying to normalize kink, normalize this stuff so that it's no longer kinky. Well, the crazy thing is that kink, by its very definition, cannot be normalized. So what do when they normalize certain kinks? Now there's new kinks. Now there's new, even more extreme kinks, because and then they want to normalize that. And we said this probably a decade ago, that just watch, you're going to see pedophilia next on the docket, and pedophilia is rampant now. And they're trying to normalize it like it's just really a sexual preference. It's just not a socially acceptable sexual preference. So now what are we going to do? Oh, to satiate that, we're going to use AI and let you imagine children. It's absolutely disgusting, and that is where they want to go with it. Their votes prove it. Their actions prove that they are all 100% on board with this. And like, I've had enough of it. I've had enough of sitting here looking at people on the left and going, oh, we really kind of we want the same things. We want freedom. We want people to thrive. We just disagree on how to get there. No, I don't believe that anymore. If I say that now, I'm lying, because now I know what they really want. They want to freaking diddle your kids. And whether they say it or not, they're also okay with everybody else doing it. So like, your choice, not my choice. Well, it'll be like your pedophilia, not my pedophilia. If you want to diddle kids over here, that's fine, as long as you got, consent. They're trying to lower consent. I'm just so done with it. This is why, like, my kids get on to me for being a little bit too harsh with the left. And I don't think I'm harsh enough. This is what they want. It's disgusting. And I don't think we should be at the table trying to negotiate with these kind of monsters anymore. And I look at them and it's like, oh, there's some good Democrats. There's some good. No, not anymore. There's not a place for you in this party, their party anymore. Like, you better find another place to be if you have any morals at all.
There's two types of grooming. You've got the ones that is generally associated with sexual grooming, which is, again, a particular process in order to exploit someone sexually, and the other is ideological grooming. And there's certain trends. The reason why the term grooming is used is because Tina mentioned there's processes that are used. One of it is befriending. It actually starts first with identification. You're actually looking for a weak or a soft target, and that's usually oftentimes that's a child. Again, whether it's ideological or not, right, or other. You're looking for a child. You're looking for a child with probably a difficult home life or a difficult social life. The idea is to then what they're trying to do is they're trying to befriend, and then they're trying to also isolate. So when Jeffrey Marsh talks about this whole idea of cutting off ties with your family because they don't respect you, they don't understand you can be a part of my family. You understand, it's not about trying to reconcile you with your family. It's actually about trying to get you into a situation where you are apart from the people that presumably love and care about you the most. Now, obviously, not all parents are like that. Some parents are horrible.
But they're trying to get people. They're trying to get every parent in the horrible category. They're trying to scoop in kids that like have wonderful parents. They're trying to scoop those kids in and go, oh, you can't trust your parents because of X, Y, and Z. You should cut them out. They're trying to manufacture trauma in a lot of these cases.
And that's true. I actually see evidence of that within the public school system. And again, I sit on the education committee for the Virginia House of Delegates. And so we have talked about this problem. I actually carried a bill called Sage's Law, and that was about a young girl that her grandmother had adopted her. She was having difficulties. She was having self-esteem issues. She got in with a group, I think it was in the Fairfax County Public Schools, that essentially helped her run away. And then she was trafficked. And then they finally got her back. They got her into custody. And then she was not allowed to go back to her parents because apparently the prosecuting attorney looked at this as a perfect example to demonstrate how these parents were so evil and created this hostile environment where this poor girl who was dealing with feelings of gender dysphoria had to leave. And so the proper place for her was going to be in the foster care system. So that's what they did. They didn't give her back to her parents when she was when they got her back. They put her in the foster care system where she was trafficked again. It wasn't until she got trafficked all the way to Texas that she was actually returned to her parents. And Sage's grandmother came before the General Assembly and just requested that, look, if a school is going to actively participate in trying to convince my child or agreeing with my child that they're the opposite gender, I need to be included in that. And we wrote the law. We wrote the bill very carefully. We didn't make it out to where if a kid mentioned something in front of a teacher, the teacher had to automatically report it. We said that the moment that the school makes the decision that they're going to reinforce this, then you have to notify the parent. And again, died in a subcommittee. In fact, the Democrat chairman of that subcommittee decided to put it in with another bill that was dealing with like women's sports. It had nothing to do with my bill. But heard it all together in order to minimize testimony. So Sage's grandmother, who endured quite a bit, got to speak for 60 seconds. And then they shut it down and quickly voted the bill down. So, no, this stuff is happening. This sort of behavior is happening. And it is happening with both the approval and support of the school system, which you pay taxes for. Here's some other things that are going on. I mentioned that story before about the sort of books that we were discussing. Now, again, whenever we talk about the sort of books worth in public school libraries, Democrats like to come out and say, oh my gosh, Republicans want to ban To Kill a Mockingbird, or Republicans want to ban, Pulitzer Prize winning novels talking about the horrors of slavery and the realities of what took place there that is only being used for honors classes. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the books that are actually in the public school library. Because here's the deal. If that was the case, if some of those books featured language or sexual situations or whatnot that would fall within that category, and you as a parent were notified about that, you would probably distinguish between To Kill a Mockingbird and some of the books that we're going to be talking about right now. What's interesting is none of our Democrat colleagues do. None of them. They just called us book burners or book banners, right? Why were they so afraid to just let parents know what is actually happening? Instead, I get people saying, you can ban books for your kids. You don't get to ban them for mine. Do you even know what books we're talking about? Because if we do, I'm a little bit skeptical of your parenting style. So let's go ahead and
more than that.
Let's go ahead and see.
If we can't ban that for your kids, and you're going to have your kids read what is in this, I think you should be prosecuted. I don't even think you should have access to your own kids if you let your kids, like if you're actively giving this to your kids. So no, you can't do it for your own kids either. Because if you won't protect your kids, then we're going to have to.
All right, let's go ahead and read what was in some of the books.
Here, it's called It's Perfectly Normal. I'll read some.
I'm going to go ahead and stop this right now. So this is a pastor that he has gone around to several school boards, and he's talked about this issue. Again, young ears around, you're going to want to put your headphones in. I don't think they show anything in this one that they couldn't see, but it's graphic.
Some of this for you. It says, after a bit, a person's becomes moist and slippery, and the clitoris becomes hard. After a bit, a person's becomes erect, stiff, and larger.
Pastor.
Sometimes a bit of clear fluid that may contain a few sperm comes out of the tip of the penis and makes it wet.
Can we, sir, I'm sorry.
Was it something I said? If you don't want to hear it in a school board meeting, why should children be able to check it out of the school system? We have perverts that are perverting our kids.
Yeah, so I'm going to say right now, that was the more mild one. That was the more mild one. All right, but you saw what happened there, right? Because it was the same experience we had. How dare you come to a public meeting like this and use that sort of language or read off that sort of stuff? You didn't mind it being in a children's public school library. We're not even talking about a public library, school library. Last time I checked, I don't randomly go use school libraries. That's for children. That's where that book was. Let's look at another one.
This book right here is recommended reading. It's a book called Flamer by Mike Curato. It's recommended reading for students in Las Vegas. We need to get all of the homosexual and the heterosexual out of our curriculum standards and our policies and from our libraries. When you show them that it's evil and corrupt to put.
I want to get to this other one because here we go. All right, I think this one is, yeah.
Find something for you tonight. Definition for pervert. It means to lead someone away from what is considered right, natural, or acceptable. This book
has been permitted in 6 schools in the Wake County public school system.
The book's called Jack of Hearts, by the way.
This book explicitly details anal sex, blowjob tips, a response to a letter about gay sex, and BDSM. I'll read just a little bit of this perversion. So he bends me over the bed and drizzles some lube on my. I made him wear a condom, of course, and he starts pushing it in. Use your lungs to suck, not your lips to pull. You're not trying to yank the DICK off with your mouth. You're trying to make it feel good.
I'm going to stop there.
I can barely even handle hearing that. This is supposed to be given to kids, guys.
Yeah.
And they all freak out whenever it's read in public at a public meeting to show, hey, this is some of the stuff that's in there in this library. And then they go, oh, this isn't appropriate for this audience. Well, then what makes you think it's appropriate for children?
Well, here's the other question I have, right? And then a major political party in this country will fight tooth and nail, not just to make sure that these books get in to the school libraries. They will fight tooth and nail to prevent any sort of parental notification that books are like this are in the public school libraries. I've watched as local school board races. They always want to go, oh, this is ridiculous. This isn't happening. This doesn't happen locally. One of the books that he mentioned is in the public school library system in Culpeper County, Virginia.
Yep.
Right? But no, we constantly get told, and then people feel bad. People feel like, well, what's the source for? Because somebody asked a question. It's like, whenever I talk about this, I always hear source. How many more sources are required at this point? Because you're right. It's a frustrating thing when you don't have something right off the mind. But here's what I will say. Literally, someone can go to this guy's site. This is RevWU Truth, REVWU Truth on Instagram. This is something that he has made something of a ministry of his, where he actually goes around and he reads directly from the text at school board meetings. And he's been physically removed by law enforcement several times for reading off text that is in the books that these school boards are approving or allowing to be there. Right? But then what does the media tell you? The media tells you that we're being crazy. The media tells you that we're blowing it out of proportion. What do? It's always the same 4 cycles. It's not happening. Why do you care if it's happening? If it's happening, it's actually a good thing. You're an evil bigot if you don't like that it's happening. They lie to you first. They lie to you first by telling you it's not taking place. Here's my question. The moment they say that's not happening, what they're admitting to you is that they agree on some social standard that if it was happening, that would be problematic. When you show them the source, here will be the question that you have to ask yourself, because there's plenty of sources out there for this, plenty. When you show them the source, the question you need to ask is, does that change your mind? If they immediately start to go into the process of, well, why do you really care? What does it really matter? Here's what you know. They are either lying to you about not knowing it was happening, or they've always thought it was fine if it was happening. And the question you have to ask then is, why? Why do you, I want you to answer a specific question. Why do you think it is okay to put this material of a very, very overt graphic sexual nature into a public school library? Why do you think that's a good idea? And that's the question they need to start asking. And look, don't count on the press to start asking it. The press supports it. With very, very few exceptions, the mainstream media supports this. Why do they want it? Why has it become such an important part of the public school system to incorporate this sort of material into public school libraries? You have to ask that question, because there can be a variety of different reasons. I don't think any of them are good. I don't think any of them are justified. But the point is we're not the crazy ones. This is going on. They know it's going on, and yet not one of them actually runs around saying, hey, I want to be elected to the school board because I will support this kind of literature in your public school library. But there it is. There it is. All right, let's go ahead and let's look at another one. I'm going to jump to a different category here. And this has to do with kind of the gender ideology within the classroom and what that entails. So this right here is actually, A lot of times they'll demonetize you if there's music in some of these videos that you share. So sometimes that's the reason why we mute it. But this one was somebody took a video of what my teacher had in her classroom. So she's unpacking all these flags for her classroom. It's the bisexual flag, the gender fluid flag, the LGBT ally flag, the LGBTQ flag, the trans flag, like all these various flags, and then the pansexual flag. So that was all going up in the classroom for the students. Now again, keep in mind, 3 or 4 years ago, you would have been told this isn't happening or it was an isolated incident or whatnot. Now you're being told that you're bigoted if you think this is inappropriate. If you think that dedicating class time to the promotion of certain ideas with respect to pansexualism, if you think that's bad, the problem is you. And that's exactly why they want your kids into these classrooms, because you are not going to instruct them in the way that they think they should be instructed. Now, I want to point out, we did an episode a while back where we actually talked about the ideological underpinnings of all this. And again, we're going to get to this a little bit soon because there are some fascinating quotes from the head of the American Library Association. There's some fascinating quotes from postmodernists, existentialists, feminists. And it explains a lot about why you're actually starting to see this. These things are connected. This is not just about someone wanting to scratch a particular itch or wanting to engage in a particular part of activism. A lot of it is connected to something bigger. Let's look at this next one. This is a video of a person who's wearing a trans flag with resist on it, and he is very excited about, yeah.
Hey everybody, I started my training today for my new job, and so I'll be in the classroom soon, working with kids again, like I'm supposed to be. Also, I got my nails done. Check them out. What do you think? Vampire nails suit me, right? Good for back scratches? Anyway, have a great day.
Again, there was more of these than I could actually, put into one episode. But the idea is that there are certain people that go into teaching because they truly value education. They have a gift for instruction. I taught at a homeschool co-op for a while. I enjoyed having discussions with students. There are other people that go, I forget who the famous bank robber was, but they asked him, why do you rob banks? He goes, because that's where the money is. There's other people that go into industries or they go into professions for which there is children, and that's why they're going. They're not going because they want to educate children or they want to help develop them. They're going because that is what they are attracted to.
It's for the same reason that pedophiles hang out at parks. Everywhere you go, you are going to have predators, because predators just exist. And they a lot of times will try to seek out power. It's not always going to be the hobo on the side of the road. It's not always the person that it looks like. Sometimes you have no idea, what's actually lurking in a person's mind. And just because somebody goes into teaching doesn't mean they're all going for the right reasons. Just because somebody goes into the church, for instance, doesn't mean they all go for the right reasons. And just because someone goes into the medical field doesn't mean. Anywhere you go, you find nefarious things happening. You got nursing. Nursing is a wonderful profession. Most of the people in there are amazing. Then you also have certain nurses that have swapped out medications or are stealing the medication in order to take it themselves. Or, God forbid, I can't remember where this happened. It was like last year or something. A nurse was brought up on charges for killing patients purposely. Yeah. And so you're going to have predators all over the place. It just seems to me like the school systems now are saturated. And part of the reason they're saturated is because all of this behavior, this deviant behavior, has become normalized. And these people are going through the system, and it's just they've been primed and groomed from a young age, and now they're ready to prime and groom the new ones from a young age. And the sense of normal, the Overton window has shifted so far that even when we were young, it would have been mind-blowing for anything like this to happen. And then also, I keep hearing people go, oh, I'm in a rural area. My school doesn't have this kind of stuff. Well, let me just share with you real quick. a lot of states have certificate, like what is it called? Now I can't remember the name. Basically, it's a high need area. They will do certain things like pay off your student loan debt if you stay in this high need area for a certain amount of time. Where are the high need areas? Oh, a lot of times they're rural areas. They get people to go, these people, to the rural areas in order to saturate it there too. Don't think you're going to be untouched.
We got two more that we're going to go through, and then we're going to actually explain some of the ideological underpinning, the actual training that takes place in order to promote this, right? So, because again, if you don't understand that this is part of a larger worldview, you're missing a significant component of this, and you're not going to be able to effectively educate your kids to be able to contend with it. Because even if you pull your kids out of school, there's still going to be access to social media. There's still going to be access to you cannot possibly sanitize the entire world for your kids. What you're trying to do is protect them from the worst stuff. The way I've described it before is, look, your kids are going to get bruises. You're trying to keep them from getting scars, right? You're trying to keep them from getting things that are really just going to cause legitimate trauma. I'm not talking about the stuff that everybody claims is legitimate trauma, right? That is going to carry with them the rest of their life and be formative within their lives. You're trying to avoid that, but you cannot sanitize the world, so you do have to equip them. All right, so we got two more things we go through here. This other one, I don't think most people understand, because a lot of times sex education tends to have a positive connotation with a lot of people. They think, well, of course you want to teach kids about basic biology and how their bodies work, and of course sex is a part of that. And and if we have more sex education, we'll have fewer teen pregnancies. And this is proven by the statistics. Well, no, not necessarily, especially now with the abortion pill, because we have no idea how many abortions are taking place chemically by somebody taking a pill. But nobody is going to convince me that sex education has actually reduced promiscuity. And the dirty little secret here is, the more you encourage young people who their brains have not even fully developed to essentially give in to their impulses and sexual inclinations, the more likely they are to not only have emotional damage or to potentially get into situations that are physically violent, but the larger probability too that you do have either an unplanned pregnancy, which results in more money for Planned Parenthood, or you have a whole host of other situations associated with that, where you are waking up in a child's mind something that they have not developed the emotional maturity to be able to deal with. And because kids are curious, the more you are talking to them about these things at an early age, and especially the more strangers are talking to them, right? Or not even strangers, but let's just say the more the government through the public school system is taking this responsibility upon themselves in order to do, the more difficult a lot of this becomes. And I've heard people say, well, I'd much rather, my kid's teacher that I know and I trust explain some of this to them than, TikTok or whatever else it is. Understand that a lot of times when a school system is doing this, I think it's something like 80% of the sex education in the United States is blessed off and approved by Planned Parenthood. So understand, it's not as if they're just being taught basic biology and how things work, right? They're actually being given a worldview. They're being taught how to think about this, not just, hey, here's some of the concerns and maybe here's this why you shouldn't do that. No. More often than not, a lot of times they're being taught, when you do this, use protection. When you do this, make sure it's consent.
It's when you do
this,
now.
When you do this. And so it's almost this idea that, well, of course you're going to do it. When that comes from an authority figure within the school system, it's actually giving tacit approval. Whereas if you have the sort of values where you've taught your children the way I know we've taught our children, which is to say that, no, this is a wonderful thing, but it's meant within the boundaries of marriage. And the reason why it's meant within the boundaries of marriage is to protect you emotionally, spiritually, physically. It's also to provide for the care and provision of children. It's supposed to be because there are such large consequences related to this particular action. It's supposed to be within a safe environment between two people who love, respect, and are committed to one another. If you're telling you that, but then your kids are going off to a school system where they're getting sex education from someone that is telling them, oh, look how fun and interesting this is, and let's talk about all the different ways that this is experienced, you are getting a contradictory message from an authority figure you have told your kids to respect. You have to understand that. So let's go ahead and talk about what's going on. If you don't believe me that this is all just basic discussions of biology and the consequences of, no, okay, let's take a look.
Hold on. Before you go on to that, it's another cycle that I see the left using. Just like with abortion, it was you know, we don't want these women doing these back alley abortions. They're super dangerous. We just want to make it safe, legal, and rare. Safe, legal, and rare. And then, so just like that has progressed now into abortion anytime, at any phase during pregnancy, for any reason, no apologies. It's pretty much a rite of passage now. And if you threaten in any way their ability to dismember their own unborn children, you're threatened with this whole, you know, oh, you hate women and you don't like women to be in control of their bodies. It's you're a bigot now because you don't agree with, you know, dismembering babies. Well, just like that took that turn, sex ed was originally started to try to lower the birth out of wedlock rate, which it has not done. In fact, it's gotten far worse. And it was sold as, well, we need these people to be educated because, you know, maybe they don't know why they're getting these STDs, and we need them to understand, like, there are consequences to having sex and they're STDs, and you want to make sure that, you know, you're safe. And then the safe sex comes out, and now it's like, use a condom. And then it morphed into, you can have sex with like pretty much anybody, and maybe your parents don't really like that you want to have sex with this person, but here's how to do it safely. And now you've got these books giving them techniques for how to give really good blowjobs, you guys. Or let's give techniques for how to make this work and how to make that work and how to get this person to this point and that person to that point, how the buttons work. Sex ed was never supposed to be teaching you how to
it wasn't supposed
really
to be a
good
guide.
sex.
It was supposed to be a warning.
It was supposed to reduce the amount that young people were having sex and make them aware of the dangers involved in the type of
irresponsible sexual behavior between people that are just simply not ready and not committed.
By showing them disease, pregnancy, things like that. So this all has gone on a cycle, just like everything else goes on a cycle. And another reason why I really do believe they're the enemy now.
Okay, let's go. I got two more clips that we're going to show. This is Meet Karina Bravo. She's a sex educator and works for Planned Parenthood. Schools throughout Ohio hire her to teach kids about sex and masturbation. So let's go ahead and see what this entails.
The day with me as a sexual health educator. So day one is introduction day. The kids did a project that looks something like this. I can't show much of it, of course. And then we headed over to the health center to grab some more things for the kids. Here's some merch we have, some pins, t-shirts, pamphlets that we give out to parents and other people at other events.
Hi, I'm Elle Woods, and this is Breezer Woods, and we're both.
So for those of you who are watching, she's holding, let's just say, an implement that is, well, whatever.
Gemini vegetarians. I have a bachelor's degree in fashion merchandising from...
Periods are a very normal part of being a human with a uterus. Motherhood, 0 out of 10. Would not recommend. Motherhood is also one of the many reasons why I still support safe and legal abortion care. Because even though I never considered an abortion when I was pregnant with my daughter, and even though I've known my entire life that I wanted to be a mom at some point, nobody should be forced into doing this. I will never be able to be selfish ever again. I will never be able to relax ever again.
Happy Masturbation Month. Masturbation is the safest form of sex.
G-block, all we know is red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum, red rum.
You gotta
G-block, all we know is red.
On there.
Okay. Yeah. So again, this is one of the people that the Ohio public school system pays to come and talk to your kids about sex education. So if you honestly believe that all that is her going in and explaining female and male anatomy, I mean, they don't even know what that is. She said a person with a uterus. It's not even female and male anatomy anymore to them, right? It's this ambiguous terms that they're using. But this is all about, to Tina's point, this is more of instruction on how to do it and all the different ways you can do it and how you should do it, as opposed to, hey, here's how this works. And, oh, by the way, the consequence of doing this can result in physical, emotional problems. It can also result in pregnancy. So maybe you shouldn't do it if you're not ready to actually carry those responsibilities or possess the emotional and intellectual maturity to engage in it. No, that's not it. That is not it. An agenda is being pushed. An agenda is being pushed. And it's amazing because I will sit in the committee hearings and people will come up and like, well, this is all just about doing that. And here's all the stats that prove. By the way, when they're the ones collecting the stats, understand something. It used to be that there were fairly concrete academic standards with respect to determining what constituted good statistics versus bad ones. Now, they can always be manipulated, right? They can always leave out data, whether it's intentional or whether it's just maybe poor research or something was overlooked, right? That can happen. Understand right now that a lot of the studies you're seeing and a lot of the stats that are being conducted, they have a very obvious ideological agenda, and they will arrange the stats in the way that they need to get the result that they want. A perfect example of this was the debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Donald Trump says crime is up. ABC, well, as you know, Mr. President, the FBI says that violent crime stats are way down because the violent crime stats don't include Los Angeles or New York City. You see what it was? He didn't lie. The FBI crime stats do suggest that, as long as you leave out data from two of the largest and, in many respects, violent cities in America. Right? This is how it's done now. This is why I did a reel on this a while back. This is why I tell people you don't need a peer-reviewed study for everything that you do. There are certain things that are fairly obvious through education or through observation and experience. And so I feel like sometimes with the left, the reason why they're so enamored with experts and peer-reviewed studies is because they have 90% ideological capture of the places doing those studies. So when the studies selectively pick data or statistics in order to prove what they want, they get to give the air of an academically rigorous research, when in reality, this was, how do we give the appearance of academically rigorous research in order to get what we want, in order to silence you? And
it's to gaslight everybody.
Yeah.
It's basically really, really tricky gaslighting. And I just can't.
Okay. Now, if you all thought, okay, Nick, sure, but gosh, sex education, that generally happens a little bit older, right? This is when kids are teenagers. All right. Well, here's a mother that is sharing with everybody what they were trying to teach to her 5th grader.
Parents, this video is for you. It is imperative that we pay attention to what is going on in our schools. I got a permission slip recently from my daughter's school, and we live in a fairly conservative area next to Akron, Ohio. The permission slip was for her to attend health class. Mind you, she is in 5th grade. It had the syllabus on there and a link to show you what material she will be learning. I did some research, and you will be astounded, oh my gosh, blown away by what they are trying to teach my 5th grader. Watch this video. It is absolutely disgusting.
Yes, come on, yes, oh yes, aha!
To give you an idea, this is a cartoon. It's a cartoon of a picture of a young boy that is clearly behind a computer looking at pornography, and you can guess.
What are you doing there? You've had enough for one day. You'll go blind. I'm coming!
How many times is too many to masturbate in one day?
Hashtag AskAmaze!
There's no limit on the number of times a person can masturbate each day.
I have another question. Sometimes my penis stands up in the air, and it feels good when I touch it.
When your penis stands up, it's called an erection. Girls also have a private part that they may want to touch because it feels nice. The clitoris. It's okay.
Mind you, I'm reminding you, the video is for 5th graders. And we, on the right, are saying that the left is trying to over-sexualize our children. This is exactly what we're talking about. And they want to gaslight us and pretend that it's not happening.
So again, she's absolutely correct. And once again, there's the receipts. Now, most parents probably got a permission slip from their children for something that was going on and probably just kind of signed it. Why? Because there's a certain amount of trust that is banked into this idea, because most of us, when we were going to school, and I went to public school. I also went to a very, very small kind of like Christian school. Tina and I both did I went to middle school and high school, but elementary school I went to public school. And I remember growing up in that environment thinking that it was a fairly safe and reasonable place to be educated. My grandmother was one of my teachers in public school, in elementary school. And I remember getting sex education. And when that sex education came in, you had a male instructor for the boys, you had a female instructor for the girls. And it literally was a discussion about biology. It was to explain to kids, hey, these things are going on. And again, it was kind of like, a lot of giggling and feeling awkward and whatnot. But there was nothing like this. I mean, this whole thing starts off with a cartoon showing a boy who's obviously, on the computer looking at pornography and whatever.
Yeah, so it's normalizing pornography.
Yes.
That's another thing.
It's normalizing pornography. And then what it's doing is it's trying to make the parent look stupid, right? Because the parent yells through the door, you've had enough for one day.
You'll
so
go blind.
So the parent is sanctioning it, right? Because it's perfectly natural, perfectly normal. And spreading a falsehood that you'll go blind if you do X, Y, and Z, right? But now they're going to come in and give you the real information on this. So even inherent in the video is the idea that the parent is either neglectful or incompetent. And it's the school system in this cartoon that is going to teach you the real stuff with respect to this issue. And again, we get told, and like she said, she's in a fairly conservative area. This is going on at her public school in a fairly conservative area. So the question is, and I'm going to get to some of the super chats here as well, because, Teddy, thank you for the super chat, asks, how does a father combat this while co-parenting 50-50 custody, 2 boys under 10? I am remarried to a good Christian woman who shares my worldview. We're going to go into that right now. We're going to talk about some of the things that you can do. But I first want to lay down the groundwork here. There is a much more advanced ideological and intellectual movement behind this. There was a letter signed in, I think it was 1977, could have been 1976, but it was through a bunch of French existentialists, postmodernists, feminists, Simone de Beauvoir, Jean-Paul Sartre, I think, was on some of it. I think even Michel Foucault was on some of them, where they were essentially all signing on a letter to try to bring down the age of consent to 13. There was other letters that were trying to bring down the age of consent even lower. They were actually advocating on people that have been convicted of having sexual relationships with children, I believe as young as 7 and 9. And the idea was, the argument that they provided in defense was, well, this is just a person exploring their sexuality. This was just a person that was that consented. They actually believed that a 7-year-old could consent to this sort of behavior. Now, again, this wasn't some, strange weirdo off the street, right? These were well-respected academics and thinkers within a lot of it, the French academic environment, which has heavily influenced American academia. If you look at Karl Marx was a big believer that children should not be primarily educated or raised by their parents. They should be educated and raised communally. They should be raised by the collective, right? If you look at Friedrich Engels, he actually talks, he was the co-author of, I think, the Communist Manifesto and Das Kapital. He talks about how the idea of free love ends up connecting itself, or ends up being kind of an inherent part of socialist and communist thinking. And a lot of that has to do with tearing down, because, again, they believe that in order to actually create the right environment for their ideologies to be able to thrive, you actually had to kind of reinvent the people that you were dealing with. Antonio Gramsci, an Italian socialist, actually wrote about this. It became known, he didn't coin this phrase, but it became known as the march through the institutions. It was the idea that if you really want to achieve this sort of end state, you can't do it exclusively through economic means. You actually have to compete for or compete against culturally shaping institutions in order to create the sort of people that will be willing to listen and adopt and to implement the sort of plans we're talking about. You need to understand that deeper intellectual and ideological movement is part of what is fueling this stuff going on within your schools and going on within your children's entertainment. It is too simple, and it is completely inaccurate to just chalk this up to, it's a bunch of pedophiles that want to diddle kids. That's a part of it, but it's actually connected to a much deeper movement that believed that this was a part of creating a new kind of society. Where do you create new kinds of societies? Well, I can tell you right now, you don't do it by convincing 45-year-old men or 45-year-old women that have lived their entire lives, have some experience, understand how the world works. You don't typically do that. You do it by taking over the education of their children. And in fact, the way that you advertise it to loving parents is, we're going to not only remove this burden so it frees you up to be able to do other things or work outside the house or make more money, but we're going to staff it with the kind of professional educators that you couldn't possibly replicate within a different environment. So we're not only doing you a favor, we're doing your children a favor. And on some level, this seems to make sense, right? I don't do my own heart surgery. I don't do my own dentistry. You know, many people, we go to a mechanic when there's something wrong with the car, right? We call in a carpenter, or we call in a plumber, or we call in an electrician when we need something done. Of course, we talk to specialists and we rely upon specialists in order to do critical work, which is necessary for us. So why wouldn't we outsource those same responsibilities to a series of specialists when it comes to the raising and education of our children? But when those culturally shaping institutions, when institutions of higher education, especially their education departments, have been taken over by a certain ideology with a certain purpose and a certain mission, when you read things like critical pedagogy, and if you want to learn more about critical pedagogy, I really encourage you to go over to New Discourses with James Lindsay. We had him on the show a while back. He did a whole book called The Marxification of Education. Read that book, but he also does some videos for like 20-minute videos. If you want to get an understanding where a lot of this is coming from, again, this is not isolated. These things are connected. And there was a mission, there was a path. And what's so fascinating is that every time we mention that this is actually going on and it's a part of something bigger, we get told that we're conspiracy theorists. We get told that we're crazy. We get told that we're overreacting. We get told, why do you care so much? But what's interesting is when we quote these people back to themselves, when we quote Simone de Beauvoir, who literally said in a debate that she didn't believe that women should be able to choose to be homemakers, to stay at home with their kids, because if that was a choice, too many of them would choose it. When we show that Karl Marx was completely hostile toward the nuclear family, when we show that Herbert Marcuse came right out and said, yes, I'm a Marxist, and we're cheating this within academia because we want to create more Marxists. When we quote them, we get told we're being ridiculous. Right? So stop listening. Stop listening. The other thing you need to keep in mind is this. If you are competing for institutions which are so intellectually captured, and a good way to understand this, let me back up. If you're competing for institutions that are so intellectually captured that there's no possible way that you're going to be able to fix them throughout the course of your child's education, don't send your kids there. Don't send their kids there. Unless you are going to be able to commit to putting the exact same amount of work in to contradicting what they're being taught within that environment. And no, this does not mean that I'm anti-teacher. This does not mean that I'm anti-schooling. But I'm being tired of being told this isn't going on by the very people responsible for running many of these institutions. I'm tired of being told by the teachers' unions that this isn't happening. And then when they're presented with evidence that it is happening, they immediately turn it to either attack me or gaslight you and treat you like you're the one with the problem. Well, wait a second. If it wasn't a problem, why didn't you just say, as soon as I announced this is going on, why didn't you say, oh yeah, that's going on and here's the reason why it's a good idea? You didn't say that. You said, no, it's not. It was only until I presented the evidence source that you then admitted it was. So you knew something was wrong. You knew that if people actually knew what was going on, they'd be frustrated by this. So you immediately moved to turning it on them. Go read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals if you want to understand how this process is taking place. They lay it out. They explain it. They were not at all bashful about what they wanted to do and how they wanted to do it. And this is a part of it. And one of the things, the reason why so much of this collectivist mindset is rooted in this idea of sexual identity and waking your kids' sexual nature up way too early in their lives is because inevitably, it is an ideal way to separate your children from you, your morals, and your values. Because once you start to go down that path, if you start to feel bad about it, or if you start to feel guilty about it, or conviction about it, they're going to come right in and say, no, that's not you. That's not a conscience. That's not any sort of moral inclination. No. That's your parents imposing trauma on you. That's your parents that have essentially imposed a worldview on you, indoctrinated you, and we're going to be your new family. We're going to be the ones that show you that this is just part of your true self. And the further and further they take you down that road, the more and more committed you will be to it. Until some people who are waking up now or who are realizing now, there's a whole site dedicated toward detransitioners that are starting to realize I physically ruined myself, and I did so with the approval and encouragement of my parents, my teachers, my social circle. Nobody was willing to step up and say this is wrong. So you need to understand that it is part of a bigger ideological movement. This is not just some weird, quirky thing that's going on. This is a part of something significantly. So what do you do about it? What do you do about it? Well, we've talked about this a lot. You can homeschool. You can take your kids out of an environment that you think might be potentially hostile for them. Now, some people, maybe financially they can't do that. Maybe they think that they can't do it, but they actually could. You're going to have to make that decision for yourself, right? I'm not going to make it for you. Nobody can. You got to make it for yourself to determine whether or not you can afford to. But I will tell you this, anybody that's telling you that it's impossible, that you can't do it, or if they're being especially nefarious, telling you that you're putting your kids at this enormous disadvantage because they're not going to get the benefits of everything going on within the public school system, I'm going to tell you right now, that is a pretty pernicious argument. You need to start really questioning that, because that is presented in such a way that is almost meant to make you feel guilty for questioning what your experts have told you need to be doing. Now, if you can't homeschool and you can't maybe afford another option, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you think homeschooling or private schooling, if you think that's difficult, you need to start understanding how difficult it's going to be to both send your kids into that environment and stay up on exactly what your school's doing, what teachers are doing, what administrators are doing, what counselors are doing, what new curriculum's coming in means, what your politicians are doing, what your school board is doing, what your library is doing. You have to keep up on all of that. I hope if nothing else, we have demonstrated that if you thought any of these were just carte blanche safe places, there's no way this could be going on in my environment. It isn't. It isn't. Some of the most left-wing, woke, progressive, and really, if we're being honest, Marxist elements of the university system are the education departments, because they know how important it is. So you might have some wonderful teachers. They had to go through some of this, and some of them resist it, right? Some of them resist it. They go in there. They have a heart and a passion for teaching kids. They're good at it. And that's all they want to do. And they avoid this stuff as much as they possibly can, or even counteract it at times. And God bless you for being willing to go into that environment and serve that purpose. But this is not the mission field for your children. This is supposed to be a place where they can go and learn and equip them to be able to contend with the world. Economically, socially, politically. How much confidence do you have? Ask yourself this. How well do you know all of the people that are interacting with your children? Because guess what? You could have the best school with the best teachers, the best administrators, the best counselors. Do you know all the parents of the kids that your child is interacting with? Do you know what those kids? Well, I don't give my kid a smartphone. Oh, cool. Do all their friends have one? Because if all their friends have one, I guarantee you they're seeing stuff. And again, I'm not asking you to sanitize the world. You can't. You can't be everywhere at once. You can't do everything once. You can't lock your kid up, nor should you want to. But I am telling you, if they're going into that environment and you think these other alternatives are difficult, the amount of work that you're going to have to put in to fostering that relationship and that trust with your child, when they are inevitably going to run into either other students or potentially authority figures that are going to try to tell them that you are raising them incorrectly. The values you are giving them are wrong and evil and mean and bigoted, but that's okay. They can come and talk to them. Maybe that's not going on in your school. I'm willing to bet you don't know whether or not it is. And that's just a reality. It's a very hard reality, and I'm sure people will be mad at me for it, but it is what it is. We got a couple other super chats here I want to get to. Build Better Burritos, thank you very much, said, there is a Facebook page called Trans Furry. The people commenting there make a point to state that they will corrupt your children against you. Keep in mind, for a lot of the people in the more activist wing elements of this movement, they don't see this as them grooming your child. They see this as saving their child from your horrible ideology, right? You're the bad guy. And so you're the one that needs to be treated with suspicion. We see this within the legislation in Virginia. Again, Virginia, we're not California, we're not Massachusetts, we're not Illinois, right? Virginia. We have bills that it's amazing when we have these arguments about why is the school doing this without the parents knowing? Why is the school doing this without proper notification? Why is the school doing things that the parents should be doing? And the answer we get is, well, some parents are bad. Okay. Some teachers are bad. Some administrators are bad. Some school systems are bad. Why is the automatic assumption with government agencies to assume that they're the ones that are noble and truly understand and know what your child needs, but you as the parent should be viewed with skepticism? Why is that their starting point? Unless, of course, they've adopted this kind of collectivist argument and mindset that this is the way children are supposed to be raised. This is the way children are supposed to be educated. And so if it contradicts what you're doing at home, good.
Let's not forget that this is classic grooming tactics. When a child is groomed by an adult, they are a lot of times, like we look at this video that we watched just a few minutes ago of this kid. He's looking at porn and he's servicing himself while he's looking at porn. Well, right away, it normalizes porn and then basically expands kids' curiosity in this area. Well, typically groomers will use porn. They will expose kids to things they shouldn't know in order to elicit a bodily response from them, because your body will respond. And that is how they gain entrance. And then the other, so if your school's doing that, this is a grooming tactic. They are normalizing porn for your kid, and this is straight up right out of like grooming handbook. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that groomers do is they will say, well, not everybody understands that how we feel about X, Y, and Z. So they'll try to get like a camaraderie with the kid, and they'll try to get the kid to sort of yield to whatever this emotion is or this feeling, bodily feeling they're getting. And then the groomer will basically point to everyone else outside of their little sphere and go, they're out there, they won't understand. And because they won't understand, we should probably keep this a secret. And in fact, we have to keep this a secret, because if they found out about this, you would be in big trouble. Yeah. And I would be in big trouble. And we're such good friends. You wouldn't want to get me in trouble, and I wouldn't want to get you in trouble. This is what the school's doing. They're keeping the parents from knowing what's going on. And they say it's not going on. They gaslight the parents. And just... You walk step by step through what a groomer does, and then you walk step by step with what the school systems are doing. Mm-hmm. And it's literally step for step the same thing, except maybe you don't have a teacher actually touching your kid yet.
Well, it's ideological, right? It's ideological grooming, not necessarily sexual grooming.
I know, but like sexual grooming is definitely at play here, and there's a reason why the sexual side is so very tied to that, is because it's a great way to gain entrance. Predators have been doing it for ages.
Well, and again, there is a connection. There is a connection between some of the foremost thinkers within leftist ideology and what you would call pedophilia, right? Again, Foucault, Beauvoir, Sartre, like, you cannot deny the fact that the sexualization of children has been linked to leftist ideology. That doesn't mean that everyone that's a Democrat thinks this way. Of course not. But there is this idea that when you adopt this kind of critical theory, like for instance, when you tell a child, if you're going to actually say that a child has the mental capacity to be able to say, I am not the gender I am, right? I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. I'm not a girl, I'm a boy, whatever it is. And then they go through counseling, and the counseling almost always shifts toward that which is more profitable, which is taking the pills, getting the surgeries, everything else, because it's lifelong requirements at that point. How big is it a stretch to say that your 9-year-old understands their sexual identity so well that you have to pervert their natural bodily process through hormone blockers or chemical castration medicine? And then once they get to, maybe in their teens, now we're going to actually start conducting surgeries, not to create the things that we're saying, but to create some sort of facsimile of it, right? How do you do? So they know enough to do that at 9, right? Because again, if we're talking about puberty blockers, if you're going to block puberty, you could be doing that as early as 9, 10, 11, 12. How easy it is to then transition to the argument. Well, then if they know who they are and they know their own body and they know their own sexuality, well, then of course they're capable of consenting to other things. It's not hard to see how they're going to make that argument. It's not hard to see because they have made this argument in academia. They've made it on that letter that I mentioned that was signed in 1977. They've made the argument. It's just that there was such a horrendous backlash. It was like, ooh, we need more time with this. So that's one of the things that you actually notice. Bill Ayers, Bernadine Dorn, right? 2 people, prominent people within academia, prominent people within leftist circles, very close to the Obama family. Bernadine Dorn was trying to start a race war in the United States. She was a Marxist. They were blowing up buildings and trying to kill people. When she got out, where did she go? Academia. They were disappointed that the violence wasn't actually going. They wanted violent revolution, and what they realized was, oh, things aren't as bad as we thought they were, and people are not ready to actually revolt. So where do we go next? Academia. Well, now that's been the academia that has educated many of your teachers, many of your administrators. Should we really be that shocked? Paladin, thank you very much for the super chat. Says, thanks for all you do, Nick. I'm a devout Christian working at a public school, but a new Orthodox school is being built and hiring near me. Should I stay and fight here or should I go? That's really something you've got to pray about and decide. Again, my typical advice with kids is if you can actually get a good alternative, you need to leave, because otherwise you're going to have to be so involved within the school system to make sure that things aren't happening that I think it's actually more work in the long run. Some people have also decided that, look, the public school has resources that I don't. I want my kids to benefit from those resources. Okay, if you make that decision, right, I understand the argument. If you make that decision, understand that there's potential social consequences, there's potential ideological consequences. And so this is a trade-off. It is not an either-or proposition. It's a trade-off. And if you want them to get the benefit of those resources, you're going to have to be involved there. But for teachers, I get it, man. I get the pull to want to be a positive influence within that environment. Just keep in mind that you're probably eventually at some point going to be punished for it if you do not walk the party line. And so you're going to need to pray about that and feel where you're actually called to go and where you think you can actually do the most good. So I do think there's a place for people that want to kind of stay within this environment and try to be a positive role model or try to serve a positive purpose. But I'm sorry I can't give you like a perfect answer. Again, there's going to be other schools like that need that as well. The other thing too that people need to understand is just because it's a private school, just because it's a so-called Christian school or Catholic school, does not mean this ideology hasn't slipped its way in. And so it's very important for people to understand that you need to be involved in your children's education, whether you homeschool, whether you're private school, whether you're public school. You are still ultimately responsible for it. But that's what I would take a look at before you switch. I would definitely take a look at the Orthodox school and make sure that it's actually teaching along the guidelines and doctrine that you think is appropriate, because it's not always a foregone conclusion. But that could be a very beneficial alternative, because we do need more teachers in the environment that are actually providing good quality education to students. I think we had another one in there. If I skipped one, I apologize. I think there was another question. Okay, here we go. Cheryl Hill said, Nick, question. My husband and I don't have children, but we are very concerned as citizens about what is happening. What can we do to help? By the way, we are in Chicago. Thank you. So there's a couple of things. Just because you don't have kids doesn't mean that you can't show up to school board meetings, doesn't mean that you can't get involved in the political process and make sure that you're actually voting people. Now, I will say this. There's a lot of Republicans that like to talk about being pro-school choice or being frustrated about this. I've had to fight Republicans on this issue. When it comes to some of the books in school libraries, when it comes to boys and girls locker rooms, do not think that just simply because someone has an R by their name that they're going to vote that way. It's usually a good indicator, but it's not guaranteed. So you can be involved in the political process. That's certainly a part of it. The other thing that I would do is I would say, like, if you're planning to have children one day, I would start planning now for what's going to happen. One of the things Tina and I talked about when we were 18 and 19 and we were dating was we talked about, like, okay, what sort of lifestyle do we want to have as a husband and wife? What are our expectations as far as income? And Tina's biggest expectation for me as a provider was, when we start having kids, I don't want to be so dependent upon my income that I can't stay at home and raise my kids. And for me, it was like, great, that's my mission. My mission is to make enough money so that when we start having kids, I can provide an environment where, you know, and again, she didn't have any expectations with a big house or a lot of jewelry and a lot of cars. She wanted the freedom to be able to make that decision once we started having kids. And so good, that's what we got. We didn't have like gorgeous homes and fancy cars and a lot of jewelry, but we did get that time with our children. And
it was so worth it.
Yeah.
It was so worth it. I talk to Nick all the time now about the fact, like, the amount of time we've gotten to spend with our kids and forging relationship and having sort of a family culture where we all laugh at each other's jokes, and we have very similar senses of humor and very eclectic musical tastes, and we like certain types of movies and books and things like that. Man, I genuinely like our kids, and it's nice to be at a phase where I'm no longer as responsible for their education, except for Allie. She's still in school, but not being responsible anymore for the education, but reaping the benefits of just deep, respectful, and meaningful relationships. We can have debates. We can talk. They can talk to us about anything. Yeah. And it's so worth it on the other side. I only say that because for us, we homeschooled. Homeschooling's not easy. Homeschooling's hard, but sometimes hard things have big reward, you know?
Sorry.
I was just saying that in this situation, the reward has been immense, and it was so worth it.
Cheryl came back and said that they don't have kids and they're kind of past the point where that's a viable thing, but I have the opportunity and time to help others. I'm even willing to learn how to homeschool others kids if it's an option. What I will tell you is that a lot of environments, they have what they call homeschool co-ops, and so what it is sometimes 1 day a week, sometimes 2, sometimes more, just all kind of varies. And they are looking for teachers that can come in. They're all looking for volunteers that can assist at these co-ops. And so it's a great opportunity. I'm another person that believes that, you know, every church should be able to double as a schoolhouse on some level if needed. And so there are ways that, you know, you can use your education, your experience and whatnot. They're always looking for volunteers, for teachers, for things like that. So that is a great way that you can help. One of the things I always tell people is it's frustrating when we're constantly relying on political change in order to achieve what we want. What are the things that we can actually do ourselves? And that's a great way to do it. Find a homeschool co-op. Maybe maybe there's a private school that you respect or you admire, and those are great places. Tutoring is another thing that is desperately needed within the homeschool community and just the community in general. When you can be a positive role model as a tutor, a lot of people too, coaches. Oh my gosh, coaching is vital. It is amazing. I have a buddy of mine who he coaches in part because for him it's a ministry. The amount of boys that he has where the dads never show up in their life except maybe it's game day, and he's someone that tries to be a positive male role model. In fact, my son-in-law has done some stuff with this too, where they do things where they teach young boys how to be gentlemen, and so they'll have things where they teach them how to wear a suit or tie a tie, or they'll teach them how to proper etiquette and how to carry themselves, and all of this is really important. These are all ways that you can contribute that would be really, really beneficial. Okay, there was another question here. I think I missed it. So if somebody wants to put that back in the queue, I'll definitely get to it as quick as I can. But that's a big thing I want people to understand. And somebody else made a comment that homeschooling has actually never been easier, and it's true. Oh my gosh, it's true. When I think about where we were when we started, and even then it wasn't that difficult. But and Tina's probably laughing at me because she's the one that had to do the lion's share of the homeschooling. But it's not that it was difficult to find resources, right? You always have this sense of kind of uncertainty about, like, am I getting the right resources? Will this work? But there's so many conventions out there. We're actually going to be speaking at a couple next year at great homeschool conventions. There's so many resources out there like never before. And there's a lot of good programming with YouTube. In fact, we're talking about trying to do some more stuff on the homeschooling front just to be able to provide resources for people or recommendations. We've got some guests coming on pretty soon that were actually school principals, school teachers who are now homeschooling, and they have resources available. So there's a lot out there. I would just tell people, do some really basic research and you'll probably be really encouraged about, again, I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying it's easier than it's ever been before. And I would argue that on some levels, it's become easier than trying to negotiate the problems that happen within the public school at the same time. Well, look, I'm going to go ahead and close with this. If any other questions pop up while I'm doing this, I'll try to get to them. But here's what I want people to understand through this. This is happening. You're not crazy. I don't care what people tell you. And a lot of the people that are going to say, well, prove it. What you need to ask yourself is, the first thing you should do whenever they say source or where are you getting this or that's not happening, here's the first question I want you to ask them. If I can prove to you that it is happening, if I can prove to you, if I can show you evidence that it is happening, would you agree that that was a problem? Ask them before you look at anything else. Ask them that. If their answer is, well, like, no, stop, not worth your time. Not worth your time, because you have someone that is deliberately engaging in gaslighting. Same thing with politicians, same thing with experts, same things with members of the teachers unions, same thing with all of them. Now, if I could show you what's happening, if I could show you what's really happening the way I'm describing it, would you change your mind on this? Or would you help me? Would you work with me to try to prevent that aspect of what's taking place? If their answer is no, then they're not serious and they never were. So stop worrying about it. Stop worrying about it. But the other thing too is be confident in what you believe. One of the Yuri Bezmenov, who again was worked with the KGB. He worked more on the journalism side with the KGB. Defected the United States, and he talked about ways that the Soviet Union used to undermine a culture or society. And one of the things he talked about is like one of the first stages was demoralization. And part of that demoralization was creating an environment where you felt so gaslit and you felt like you really couldn't trust much. And you couldn't even trust your own eyes or your own instincts because you were constantly being told that if you interpreted reality the way you actually saw it, that made you mean, that made you bigoted, that made you racist, whatever it was. But it was part of a demoralization process, because when you are demoralized, you don't get out there and work. You don't get out there and do the research. You don't look for alternatives because this is just the way it is and maybe there's something wrong with me. Here's what I'm here to tell you. Don't be demoralized. What you're seeing is happening. And there is a way to combat it. And again, I say this as someone that is my wife and I got married at 18 and 19. We both grew up in broken homes.
19 and 20.
19 and 20, sorry. 19 and 20, we got married. We both grew up in what is considered broken homes, divorce, other issues. We went right into the military. We had no money. I was a private in the military when we first got married. Tina didn't have a job yet when she first moved out, so we had no money. So there was financial struggles associated with it. And then all of a sudden the war kicks off, and now I'm going to be leaving a lot more, and I'm going to be gone, and we're having kids during this time, and we're moving, and it's frustrating. And we're in an environment where there's a better than 50% divorce rate, and because I was in special forces, there was even a higher divorce rate. And so all of these things that we're contending with as we're trying to, be in the military and then getting out of the military and then moving across the country and starting over in a new environment and trying to find the best way to navigate all of this. And yet it can be done. It can be done. So be encouraged. Don't let anybody discourage you. Don't let anybody demoralize you. Don't let anybody try to sway you away, because some people try to do it because they're the ones that they think they should be raising your kids for you. Other people will try to do it because they're nervous about it, and somebody else doing it causes them to wonder about what they're doing. So don't be discouraged. Make the decision that is best for your kids. If you decide to keep them in because you want the resources, I get it. I get it. I'm not condemning you. But I do want you to be aware of what's going on in so many of our public schools. And this is what I'm going to tell you. Even if you don't think it's in your school right now, and maybe it isn't, do you think it's going to get better or worse? When you look at what's going on in higher education right now, when you look at what's going on with the education departments within the country, when you look at what's going on with social media, when you look at what's going on with the arts and entertainment, when you look at what's going on with all of this, do you think it will get better or worse? And then make a decision. Make a good decision for you, for your family, for your children. Right? But be encouraged that there are so many resources out there. And your kids, you are a far bigger influence on your kids. One of the ways that they've demoralized parents, that they've convinced parents through arts and entertainment especially, that dads are all stupid idiots that nobody respects. Moms are all strung out and frustrated and angry about being married and having kids. Right? And you couldn't possibly compete with Taylor Swift. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Especially in those early formative years with your children, when they need that bonding time with mom and dad, when they need that time that can't be replicated at daycare, that can't be replicated within the school system, that can't be replicated by anybody but you. When you build those sorts of bonds, what you start to notice over time is that you're the one that they want to come back to and learn from, because they know that it's safe with you, that you love them, that you will protect them, that you want the best for them. And even when you got to tell them some hard truths, they know the position it's coming from. But if you give up that time, you can't be confused when they don't trust you. So you got to make up for it one way or another. One way or another, you got to be able to spend that time. You got to be able to build that trust with them over time so that you can have the sort of relationship that when something happens that you couldn't protect them from, or when something happens, they observe something, they see something, they hear something, their instinct is not to hide it from you. Their instinct is to discuss it with you because you're a source of trust. You're an authority figure in their life. And believe me when I tell you, kids want that. Kids don't want to hate their parents. They don't want to think their parents are stupid or idiots. Dads, they want to think that you're brave and handsome and noble and smart. They want to think that their moms are beautiful and nurturing and intelligent and caring. They want to think these things about you. So show them it's true. Show them it's true when they're little. Show them it's true when they're going through all these various things. Start the conversations with them. Have in-depth conversations with them at an age-appropriate level that they're able to communicate with. Go back and forth. Ask them questions. Ask them to think about things. Take them through that process. Don't just say because I said so. Sometimes that might be appropriate. But in many cases, explain why. And ask them what they think about it. Get used to having this sort of discussions with your kids. There's going to be times where it feels a little bit tedious. But there's going to be a pattern started there very early on that they're going to remember and that they're going to go back to and rely upon. And that's what you want, because as your kids are navigating this world, there's going to be a lot of people throwing different messages at them. The question is, do you want to be involved in that conversation? And how influential do you want to be compared to everyone else out there? Because ultimately, you do get to decide that. So, make the best use of that time. All right, we got one more question that came in, and I'll end with this. Taylor Sweeney, thank you for the super chat. My wife and I don't have kids yet. What is the best way we can combat this now and prepare for the future? Love what you do. Keep it up. Taylor, here's what I would tell you. And we had a good conversation a while back. Talk about your expectations. You and your wife, talk about your expectations with raising kids. A lot of people don't do this. So we always say step one is same values, right? Same values, same worldview. That's really important because it's fine for mom and dad to have different, interests or things of that nature, right? Different preferences with food or music. That's fine, right? That actually can add, that can actually enrich a marriage quite a bit because it teaches you to like things that maybe you didn't like before or experience things you didn't experience before. But when it comes to core fundamental values, you want those to be the same. So if you've got that, the big thing I would talk about next is really discuss what your expectations are for every aspect of your marriage, because sometimes you'll be shocked that, I didn't know you wanted that from me, or I didn't know that that's where you saw us in 20 years. And when it comes to raising kids, talk about things. It's actually exciting. It's exciting to do. All right, when we have kids, how many kids do we think we want to have? And what do we think names would be? And okay, how do we look at raising boys versus raising girls? And what do you think the differences would be? And what do you think the similarities will be? And one of those questions is inevitably going to be, hey, what do you think their education is going to look like? How would we like that to look? Right? What sort of role do we want to play on that? Do we want to be the parent that is very involved when they're going to school? Do we want to be the parent that sends them to private school? Do we want to be the parent that homeschools? Right? Have those conversations so it's not something that you're trying to figure out when baby's 9 months away or popping out. Right? This is going to be something where you guys already had a plan. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. Is the plan going to change over time? Almost certainly. Almost certainly. I can talk about all the things that Tina and I talked about when we were dating, when we were first married, and what our expectations were versus reality, right? It turns out our kids do not all speak a foreign language, right? I wish they did. I wish we would have been more disciplined on that. We weren't. We were busy. There was a lot of things going on in life, but they ended up getting other experiences. So that was fine. We adjusted, but we had a plan. And when one of us wanted to adjust from the plan, or when we wanted to try something different, we knew that was going to be a conversation that we sat down and we had together. And we would come to the realization of what we thought was the best course of action. So really discuss those expectations and then financially prepare, right? Because you will give something up to homeschool. If you're relying on two incomes, you need to start working toward how do we get to the point where we're going to give up certain things. And I always advise people early on, don't set off your life absolutely dependent on two incomes. What we did in our household was we said, my income has to be sufficient to pay the mortgage, pay the groceries, pay the utilities. It has to be sufficient for that. If you're making extra money, great. We can go on a vacation, or we can do something fun, or maybe we can get something that would be neat for the house, or whatever it is. But we're not going to create new consistent bills or requirements on our income based off of yours. We're not going to do that. And we didn't. And what it meant was when we had kids and it was time to do that, we could. And we both expected it, and we both knew what was coming, and we were both excited for it. So that's what I would tell you. Anyways, thank you all very much for tuning into this episode. Hopefully this is one that people will be able to refer back to. Again, I know the ick factor is high, right? And when the ick factor is high, a lot of times people want to turn away. I'm only asking you to look long enough to appreciate what's really going on so that we can then focus on how do we actually affect the sort of change that we want to happen. And it always starts in your home. I'll put it this way. We are one generation from losing everything that we have, and we're one generation away from saving it. And that will be determined what mom and dads do with their home and with their children. More than anything else that's decided in politics, it will be decided in the home. So take encouragement from that, because that's something you have a lot more control over. Once again, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you found this helpful, and we will see you next episode.